it works better than, had we flipped that property and let's say we made 50 grand, how much of that's gone to taxes immediately? This way, we've got a cash flowing asset that's going to pay down the debt every single month, is going to cash flow every single month. And quite frankly, we got a pretty decent little nest egg out of it in just the first year and a half.
Welcome to the Good Stewards podcast, the only podcast dedicated to seasoned real estate investors who want to maximize the cash flow potential in their business. We are buy and hold investors with 1,000+ properties and markets across the U.S. who bring an insider's view into the nitty-gritty details of real estate investing. If you're looking to develop the mindset, teams, and systems that can dramatically build your real estate business and net worth, you're in the right place.
Welcome to this episode of the Good Stewards podcast. I'm Ryan Dossie.
I'm Amanda Perkins.
And I'm Bill Sirius.
And I'm Andrew Sirius. And we are the Good Stewards, so to speak. Please go to our website, thegoodstewards.com. You can subscribe to the podcast and get our free ebook. It has all sorts of fantastic information. It'll make you smarter. It'll make you wealthier. It will basically change your life for the better in we'll say a substantial number of ways, maybe the majority, but it will certainly make your life better. So do it. Do it now. Anyways, we are here to talk about the BRRRR Strategy, which is what we've been doing for basically 30 odd years. I mean, not myself. I'm just a little over 30, but Dad, you're what, 45? Thereabout,
yeah,
right? 42,
59,
43, right? Yeah.
40, yeah, I don't
Doing
know.
it since just before graduating high school, I believe. Mm-hmm. And the BRRRR Strategy is the buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat strategy. It's the rinse and repeat strategy of real estate investment. And we believe that this is the best way to get into buy and hold real estate. And we believe buy and hold real estate is the best way to become wealthy with real estate. And we believe that real estate is the best way to become wealthy in general. Now, it's not a quick process, but it is, as I've kind of been repeating a bit here, the best process in our opinion. It's basically flipping a property to yourself. So you need to get that equity margin in the same way that you would get with a flip. Say going with the 70% rule, where you're trying to get the purchase price plus the rehab, and 30% margin to cover all your costs and make a profit. In this instance, though, that profit is not a profit but a down payment that you use to basically turn the property into, either if you buy it with cash, then you use that as your down payment, so you don't have to leave any cash into the property, or more commonly the way we do it, where we get private loans onto the property up front to cover both the rehab and the purchase price. Then we refinance out that entirely, because we're getting the property refinanced at its appraised value, not the amount of money we have into it. We'll get into this more when we talk about a little bit about financing. But whenever you're buying a property, whenever you're doing this strategy, whenever you're refinancing, and you need to refinance at the appraised value, some banks will make you wait for a seasoning period for a certain period of time. But generally, they will let you go as soon as you get to that point, and you can get to the point where they'll refinance at appraised value. If you have that equity margin in it, you have a down payment, and you can pretty much buy a property for free. It's not free in terms of time. It will take some time to find the property, to rehab the property, and then to actually get appraised and go through all that fun stuff. But if you do it right, you will have a property for free, because you'll have bought it, say with a private loan. You will rehab it. You'll have this equity margin because you're buying right, just in the same way that you'd be when you're flipping. But all of a sudden, once you refinance it, you have no money left in the property if you do it right. Now, there are certainly some risks. There's some challenges with this. This is not a get-rich-quick or easy scheme. Real estate is the ultimate get-rich-slow scheme, something we like to say a lot. We're not some gurus pitching the great life that you'll get in 6 months, 6 weeks after you buy our program for $29.99 or whatever. $29.99 being $2,999. If you haven't experienced the gurus, they're not going to sell it to you for $30. But it is something that you can get that certainly works in the long term very well. The first thing I would say is you do need to look at it a little bit differently than you look at flipping, because you're looking at rental properties. So you're looking with regards to residents. You want to buy something generally and rehab it to the point that you'd be willing to live into it, but you're not trying to make something that is just going to shine. This is not your dream home. You're not buying in higher end neighborhoods. You're not buying for homeowners. You're buying for residents. And in that instance, you want to stay in sort of the middle to lower middle price range for the most part when you're doing BRRRR. And it works the best in certain and a bit less expensive markets, although it can work in just about any market. Maybe not, Manhattan, but it can certainly work in pretty much any market you find. And then the other thing you need to, and in the same token, I'd probably stay out of the so-called war zones or whatnot, which are very challenging, even if they deceptively look good on paper, just because the numbers are so good, but you're never going to see that because you end up rehabbing out all of your equity because it's so cheap. A roof costs the same on a $30,000 house as it does on a $300,000 house. So we have a lot of examples of this. We've done it quite a few times. We've done it. We're in multiple different markets. I'm here in Kansas City. Both my dad, Bill, and Amanda are out in Eugene, Oregon, and Ryan's in Indianapolis. And we've been doing this strategy for a long time. I think Ryan is sort of our go-to marketing guy and probably has the best, at least most recent examples. Ryan, why don't you take it from here and kind of go over some maybe one of your more interesting real estate escapades, we'll call it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually going to kind of go over one that we actually just closed on pretty recently. Unfortunately, this has kind of been known as the Homicide House on our end due to some facts we discovered after our purchase.
Now, they were kind of murdered?
Well, I mean, they were murdered.
Okay. Just wanted to declare this.
It wasn't they either, right? It was a...
it was a gal, unfortunately. But not going to get into the details of that too much. Normally we're going direct to seller. So we're buying off market properties. We're looking to be all in for 75% of what they're worth minus the cost of repairs. But I do want to touch on something Andrew mentioned, and that's also including things like holding costs. So when we're looking at deals, we actually subtract out the repair cost as well as an additional $5,000 buffer. And that tends to cover our holding costs as well as the cost of our acquisition. If you don't budget that in, you're going to start to have this large amount stack up. In fact, in 2018, it would have cost us about $95,000 just here in Indianapolis had we not started to account for that about halfway through the year. So typically we're going direct to seller, off market, direct mail, and online advertising are kind of our favorite ways to source deals. But this particular property we're discussing today actually came from another wholesaler in our market. Now, we haven't bought a ton from wholesalers here in Indianapolis, but there's one guy in particular that we tend to buy about a property from a quarter. And this particular deal was one he closed on, listed on the MLS, and was having a hard time moving it. It was in an area that's definitely undergone rapid gentrification, lots of new builds, lots of full-on guts. The problem he was having with selling this particular property to a flipper or a developer is it actually had a detached heated block 8-car garage. So kind of a very unique...
Wait, an 8-car garage?
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2 wide and 4 deep. That's literally larger than the house.
It's like a warehouse.
So a lot of people didn't want to deal with the issues of removal and all of that. So he was having a little bit of a hard time selling it. And then what we do anytime we look at a wholesale deal, we treat it the same way as an off-market property. We make them an offer of this is what works for us, regardless of their asking price. So we actually came in quite a bit lower than what he wanted. He was good to go. He didn't have another offer on it. So he ended up ultimately selling it to us. Now, this particular property, we actually funded 100% with private lender funding. We're paying 8 to 9% interest only, and then we typically get a 2-year term. Benefit to 2 years, something goes slow, something takes longer than normal, or like we've ran into here in Indianapolis, our local community banks want the property to have seasoned for 12 months. So really, I need more than the term that a hard money lender would give me. I need more than 6 to 9 months. So on this particular deal, we bought it for about $64,000. Our rehab was right at about $45,50. We ended all in for about $115K. So on the property, it was a little bit of a gamble on our end, just due to how unique it was. We knew we'd get a premium for the rent, but we didn't really know quite how much. I will say kind of an interesting thing that came up with this one, with the property's track record. We were about halfway through our remodel, and I got a call from my GC that said, hey, the contractors aren't going to finish your project. And I was like, what on earth? What's going on? And the neighbor came over and basically briefed the crew who was working on what had happened in the house a couple of years before we'd even purchased it. So they were worried about it being haunted, ghosts, etc. And the unfortunate thing where the body was hid in the house, they actually knocked out some brick to get into the kitchen under it, and we needed to replumb. So we thought, hey, there's kind of this nice access hole that I don't blame them for not wanting to crawl into. So the only way we actually got them to finish this portion of the kitchen was one of the guys would go in and leave his legs dangling out, and another guy had to be there holding his legs to pull them out in case they, quote, felt anything weird. Nothing happened. The weird thing with this house is I was even there alone by myself a number of times at like 1 a.m. checking on stuff. And I never, felt or, there was never any issues with it. So that's kind of how we found this house and how we funded it. Bill, I'll pass it on over to you to talk about how we got it leased and kind of the interesting scenario with who ended up there and what sort of a premium we were able to get.
Yeah, I actually happened to be in Indianapolis at the time that Ryan was looking at this house. So I looked at it with him and I think we both felt, boy, this has got a tremendous amount of potential because it has a niche market appeal to it in terms of rentability. Now, we all know the axiom, maybe the most important axiom in real estate is you make your money when you buy. But there's a second, not unlike that, and that is you retain your value when you do quality property management. And that's just the bottom line. So many folks who are doing buy and hold kind of a strategy in real estate, I don't think they take seriously the second R of BRRRR, which it's buy, rehab, and rent. That's the point at which, well, that'll just take care of itself. And in fact, renting doesn't take care of itself. Property management is a really big deal. And it's pretty easy at first when you have one or two, but then you have to think about building out an infrastructure for property management. And we'll continue to get into the specifics of that as we go along. But in this particular case, this house had just such great appeal as I looked at it, because I'm kind of a niche guy anyway. I think Ryan is too. And we saw, boy, there's got to be somebody out there who really would just die for this heated 8-car garage. And we thought, okay, we're probably looking at somebody maybe that did auto repair or, on the side was an amateur auto, or he even just had collectible cars or something like that. Well, we didn't really know who we'd get, but the factor of that for us was, let's push the rents on this one and just see. I mean, many things in this neighborhood, maybe of this size, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, would rent for, I don't know, maybe you could correct me, Ryan, you know the Indianapolis market much better than I do. I would say,
yeah, we were looking at like 800 to 900.
Yeah,
was kind of the typical rent cop. So if I was going to be all into something for 115, I wouldn't do that deal if I thought I could only get 800 or 900 in rent.
Right. So, but this again, we felt appealed to a niche market. So Ryan said, let's push it. I said, yeah, that sounds good to me. And he put the number of $1,500 a month on it, which was a fairly staggering number for this. But in fact, it wasn't long before we found a very qualified resident who really wanted that exact setup, and they rented it for us. And then they had a pet, so we got pet rent on top of that, which made it $1,550. Now, the other factor of this, he ended up, we thought, okay, it's perfect for, auto repair, whatever, or, low key auto repair. It's not a business location, but he ended up just using it for storage and taking a bunch of his toys and knickknacks out of various storage units and collecting them all in one place. So be it. That's how he used it. But we felt like that was a great return on our investment, ROI, in terms of what we had into it and the rental income that we could get out of it.
Probably a long-term resident too, given I don't think he's going to find a lot of other 8-car garages.
Yeah.
Not to mention, who wants to move 3 to 4 storage units worth of stuff once a year, right?
Right.
Or once a decade, maybe.
Yeah, they've already renewed.
Yeah. So we started out with a year lease, which is fairly typical. And then some folks go month to month after that. Some folks go to, let's up it again for another year. And there's an opportunity to have people back into their office or a setting where they can talk another year. Maybe they're upping the rent a little bit, or maybe there's some things that need to happen on the property. So it's an opportunity to touch base with the resident there and then move forward into the second year. Why don't I pass it on to the next R of BRRRR? And,
which is
that's
refinance.
There you go.
So, we make it sound like it's so simple, and it is a very simple strategy, but it takes time. So we initially purchased this property at the end of 2017, and it took us a couple months to get it rehabbed. I believe it's been rented since about February or March of 2018. And here we are in May of 2019, and we just closed on our refinance with a local lender, regional lender in the Indianapolis market. One thing that is always going to be a challenge is the refinance piece. You're not going to be able to just go take it to any bank. You're going to have to talk to banks about their qualifications, make sure that they're looking for the type of properties that we're trying to refinance. In this particular case, we got to our third bank before we were successful at closing a refinance. So we've been working on that. Refinancing a group of properties for the last 6 to 9 months. And, what that means is going out, pounding the pavement, meeting banks, building a relationship with a bank, which means putting your money in their accounts.
They want your money.
Yeah, they want your money.
Got a personal relationship.
And when we initially bought this property, we didn't know how much that garage would add. We didn't know exactly where we'd be, but we had a good idea of the market. We felt really good about this area. And where we thought we'd be with that purchase price of about 62 and our all-in rehab of about 55, we were into it about 115. We felt pretty good that our number would appraised value, it's safe, conservative number would be 160. So we got down the line, we got approved with a bank, which means you got to have your finances in order. That's a really important piece that we'll probably discuss more in depth down the line. And when it came down to it, we were expecting an appraisal in the 160, 170 range. This particular property actually appraised for 224 when all was said and done. And we were able to refinance at 75%. So we have a loan on it now of $168,000, and we were actually into it for about 115. So what that means is that we have a little extra there to take on to our next deal. And, we have a great property, nice and fixed up. We're collecting $1,550 a month in rent. It covers the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and limited repairs. We did quite an extensive rehab at the beginning, which we like to do to try to limit our repair and maintenance costs down the line. And, we're ready to take that and on to the next property, which is what we like to do.
Somebody really butchered that valuation. We'll have to have a podcast about that.
Yeah, I'm horrible. How dare I?
So you only got $53,000 in return from that? Was that what the amount was?
After mortgage, closing costs, all of that, appraisal fees, yeah. I mean, it's pretty nice when you can walk away from a bank refinance with a check and you're not writing a check.
Well, I mean, it works better than, had we flipped that property and let's say we made 50 grand, how much of that's gone to taxes immediately? This way we've got a cash flowing asset that's going to pay down the debt every single month, is going to cash flow every single month. And quite frankly, we got a pretty decent little nest egg out of it in just the first year and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't use the joke I was going to, a killer deal. That's probably not appropriate.
But you did.
I wasn't going to, and then I was like,
you did.
I'm proud of you.
But I will say this: it's generally even once you've done this a lot, even once you've done a lot of work on this, you're generally not going to get a deal that's that good. I mean, that is the goal for sure. But I think our average here in Kansas City is we're all in for about 81%. So we're a little bit extra there. And I think a few key takeaways here is one, this is not a no money down strategy. I mean, it can be, but if you go in without any cash or anything like that, you have no room for error. You have no margin for error. And so like the deal we just described is one of our best. We have some deals here in KC that certainly we've more than bird out, but we've also had some deals that we did that we missed things, or we didn't do the valuation as well, and we weren't able to get all of it out. And so if you have no money going into that, this is probably not the strategy to start with. For example, if you're say somewhat cash poor at the beginning, that would have been a great flip to get that cash in your pocket to then start BRRRRing. Mm-hmm. So there's multiple ways to look at this. We're not trying to diss flippers or anything like that, but it is.
No, I do want to point out real quick, Andrew, I think a really powerful point you made, and that's a lot of us, myself included, when I started, I was looking for no money down deals when I had no business doing a no money down deal because I had no money, right? Something breaks, you're screwed. It takes longer to rent than you think it's going to. You're bleeding cash that you don't have. So I think that's an important distinction to make.
I think all of us would say we see flipping as a noble ambition if it's a means to an end, a greater end. And the greater end is buy and hold, because that's where you're going to create wealth over time. So there is a strategy of 1, 2, 3. You buy one and flip it. You buy the second one and flip it. And then you buy the third one. And with the proceeds you've made, you hold it. You do that again, 1, 2, 3. And maybe then you get to the 1, 2 method. You buy one, flip it, and then you hold the second one, and on and on. So flipping is a great means to an end. We just don't see it as an end in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there were those that would disagree with us, but we are buy and hold fanatics of sorts, or something along those lines. The other point I think I'd make that's really important is that you need to be able to hold whatever debt you have on the property for a decent amount of time. I mean, I'm talking about 2 years or something like that, but probably at least a year. Some banks require at least 12 months of seasoning. We've had banks that require only 6, or that as soon as the property is rented and rehabbed and all that, they will refinance it at the appraised value, not the cost you have into it. But there are also banks that will require even longer, or you might have a challenge finding a bank. Buy and hold, or the BRRRR strategy, really doesn't work with hard money. It's too expensive. Usually it's about 3 to 5 points, about 15%. And so that 15% interest. And so it's just too expensive to hold long-term. But if you hold it if you have something like a private loan, say from somebody, which we'll have another episode on, just real briefly, for somebody who has some money to lend, a private lender, could be a mom and pop type, 8-9% interest, something like that, or you have some cash or something along those lines. And you can hold it for a while and get through that seasoning period, which is just the amount of time the bank will need you to wait and own the property before they are willing to refinance at the appraised value versus the cost you have into it. Because if they're just going to refinance the cost you have into it, well, then you're not taking advantage of the fact that you got a good deal and you have that built-in equity margin. All right, now that I've imparted such incredible wisdom, I guess I'll ask the rest of the roundtable. Any other closing thoughts or further input that you think would be worth putting out there?
Yeah, I want to piggyback onto what Amanda mentioned with our struggle with banks here, because this was the big fear piece for me, right? I know how to find a good deal. I know how to manage a rehab. I know how to get something rented, but the bank part felt somewhat out of my control. I can't force somebody to give me a loan, right? And we actually found a local community bank that Bill and I vetted really, really heavily. They said, hey, we'll do these all day long. We've done these before. We'll go off your appraised value, no problem. So we ended up actually banking with these folks for about a year and a half. They've had a lot of our money. They've seen a lot of transactions. We've used every upsell they've got, their remote deposit capture system, the online bill pay. I mean, we have really built the relationship on our end. And then when it kind of came time for them to honor their end of the agreement, it was a total 180. Andrew mentioned getting it based off of appraised, not off of cost. And our bank said, well, we actually don't really like these, so we'll do it based off what you guys have into these, which makes no sense for us. That defeats the whole purpose of getting a good deal. So we actually had to kind of start back over and go re-shopping back through banks. And Amanda mentioned there was 3 we went to. And when we say went to, like, they dug through our financials. I mean, we got towards the end of this thing. There was probably another 20, 25 that we started conversations with, and they didn't have an interest for one reason or another. So, that is kind of the the piece to this of you've got to have a local community bank that will work with you. And a lot of the times you don't really know till it's time for them to send you money. Are they going to do what they said they're going to do or not?
Yeah, and this is a niche loan product I think we should highlight. Now, if you're new at this, you might be able to get an FHA loan for long-term financing. There may be other options, but we're looking for commercial loans on residential properties, and that is definitely a loan product that not every bank is comfortable with, but it is the kind of loan product that we're looking for, and there are many banks out there who will service people like us who need a commercial loan. And so they're really looking at the cash flow of the properties. They're not looking at it from a residential point of view so much. So this is the kind of loan you're going after once you acquire a portfolio of loans like this.
I do think it's worth noting on their bill that these aren't Fannie Freddie loans that are going to be sold on the secondary market. These are typically loans that the bank is actually keeping in-house. So a lot of people think you can only buy 10 properties. That's obviously not true, or we probably wouldn't even be on this call. These are loans that are being done in the name of an LLC. Now, you're typically having to sign personal guarantees. You don't really get into non-recourse till you're over $1 million. But this is a product that is a loan to an LLC that the bank is keeping the paper on, that kind of that 10 Fannie Freddie limit doesn't apply to.
Right. For those who are just starting out, you can get 30-year loans with Fannie or Freddie backed government guaranteed loans, and it guarantees it to the bank is what's happening. So they can sell that loan on the secondary market. After you get, though, a portfolio of loans, you move out of the criteria of Freddie and Fannie. And so the bank has to keep the loan. Essentially, they portfolio the loan is what it's called. And that's at the place where you hope to get to soon.
Well, let's go around the table here. What is going on in your particular market or your particular business or part of our business that is really, you say, interesting or might just something cool, something along those lines?
Well, in Oregon, I would say that it's not as much of a cash flow market as some of the other markets we're in. So something we have coming down the line more often than not is, we're doing a lot of loan assumptions where maybe we find a borrower that's in distress and has a great loan on their property, and we're able to bring their loan current, do some repairs, take over their loan, slip into an ownership position. So that's kind of something we're gearing up for in our market, trying to find distressed borrowers. Subject to. Yes. Thank you, Ryan.
We'll have another podcast on that.
I'm looking forward. I'm going to make a trip out to the Midwest where a lot of our partners are at. We have partners in Dallas and Kansas City, Indianapolis, St. Louis, Louisville, etc. A few other places. But one of the fun things is going to piggyback a trip down to Florida, probably the Orlando area, meet a fellow that Ryan knows. His name is Brandon, and Brandon's very interesting, very ambitious 27-year-old who has flipped about 80 properties in his life. Very, very impressive. He's got, as a matter of fact, 8 VAs from the Philippines who are making regular contacts with potential sellers they work full time doing that. That machine he's got going is just impressive. I want to learn something about his acquisition skills. And I think what he'd like to talk about with myself, and I might bring one of our other partners, Philip, my third son, with me, is just what it takes to build a buy and hold real estate investment business. Because I think he's very intrigued by that. He's never held one before, but it's kind of like this is maybe the time and the place to start moving into that kind of a strategy. You really know the front end of this, which is acquisition, and that's so critical because you make your money when you buy, but you can build a fortune if you figure out how to buy and hold. And I think he's seen the light. He just needs somebody to walk through a few things with him, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in about a week and a half.
Yeah, so with us here in Indianapolis, we're really kind of in the growth mode phase. So Bill and I started tail end of 2017. We bought 4 properties. 2018, I set kind of this ridiculous goal of let's do 50, which was nuts. And we actually ended up doing 73 units. And so far in the first 5 months of 2019, we've actually inked another 60 units. So at the time of this, we're sitting at 127 units here in Indianapolis. And so we're really kind of in the growth mode. We're managing a lot of rehab, we're buying buildings that are occupied and taking those over, setting proper expectations with our new residents. So there's definitely different phases to this. Andrew is more in the optimization piece of this, which he'll chat about kind of on their refinances, what they're pulling out, whereas we're more in the growth mode. But I'm definitely excited. I think our goal by the end of 2019 is we want to try to be at 200 units.
Yeah, we're a little bit more on the doing more refinances now. The market has certainly gotten a little bit more challenging to buy from, so we'll be working on that next. But we just finished a refinance on 4 condos. That's an interesting deal. It's a package of 17 condos really. We'll talk about that another time. And we have 2 more refinances coming up here. One with 10 properties, another one with 9 properties. And so we're going to get pretty much to the point where we have virtually no short-term debt. It's all bank debt, other than properties we just purchased, or a few that have inherited residents that were there when we bought them, and we kind of waiting for them to leave before we fix it up and don't want to refinance it until then. So we're really getting close to that point, which is exciting. So yeah, I think a lot of interesting things happening. We have all of our markets are sort of at different places. And thank you. I guess we'll wrap this one up. Thank you again for joining us for the inaugural first ever podcast of the Good Stewards. Please join. Please go to our website, goodstewards.com. Subscribe to the podcast and also download our free ebook. And again, next week, same time, same place, which of course is whenever, because it's a podcast and you can download it whenever you want. But please join us again. Thank you and have a great day.